Of course, with the very beginning of last night's NBA draft, there was no surprise to be had, and yet it was still a special moment when the name was announced at the top of the NBA draft.
With the first pick in the 2019 NBA draft, the New Orleans Pelicans select Zion Williamson from Duke University.
And what you see there is the emotion that was on display. It was unquestionably the story of the night. So much emotion. Here was Zion last night with our Maria Taylor reacting, and this was a special moment.
I mean, I don't know what to say. I didn't think I'd be in this position. My mom sacrificed a lot for me.
And Zion, I know you said you didn't believe that you would be here in this moment. When did that belief change? Was it shaking the commissioner's hand and officially being the pick?
Yeah. It don't even seem real that I just shook his hand. I dreamed about this since I was 4. And for it to actually happen, I just thank God for it.
It's striking because, candidly, look, he knew his name was going to be the first one called last night. Everybody did, and yet you could see how much pent-up emotion was inside of him. So a wonderful moment there for him and for all of these guys who got drafted last night. We talked about that at length in the first hour of our show. Let's talk a little bit about this situation he walks into. And I opened the show by saying this, and I put it in the tease again there. Not since Tim Duncan, which is 1997, has the first pick in the draft walked into a situation quite like this one, where he isn't going to be expected to be the best player or to carry his team on a night-in, night-out basis, and he walks into a team that, if everything breaks right, could be pretty good.
But the only thing is, if you're going to use that Tim Duncan example, remember, Tim Duncan raised that trophy above his head, leading his team. So now it's up to Zion to go out and play like an all-NBA caliber performer, because I agree with you. The Pelicans have done a great job of building around him, adding lottery picks in Ball and Ingram, who the Lakers had high hopes for. Last night in the draft, they did a terrific job adding Jackson Hayes, a big guy that's going to block some shots for him and give him some size. Re-signed Alvin Gentry. I think he gets overlooked in this dynamic of building this basketball team. They've done a terrific job.
And Jay, obviously, as a Duke guy yourself, and you cover the college game, and you've been around Zion as much as anyone. Now that we have seen, for the most part, what the exact situation he's walking into, the moves have been made. There still could be a few pieces here as we go into free agency. But generally speaking, this is what this team looks like. How do you think it sets up for Zion as a rookie?
And it's an incredible opportunity, because think about how the culture of what he's walking into is drastically different than what it would have been if AD were there. It would have been toxic for him, by the way, because you have your franchise player who doesn't want to be there, all that extra added on pressure. Now think about the players that are on this roster. Now they can remain healthy. All these dudes are hungry to prove who they are. Lonzo Ball, hungry to prove who he was because he had to spread time with LeBron James. You talk about Brandon Ingram, who has that blood clot. That's a question everybody's going to wonder about. He has something to prove. Josh Hart, tough-nosed kid. Now with some of their Jackson Hayes, like another guy they're able to get. Like, they have athleticism, they have power, they have speed. They're one of the most fascinating, entertaining teams to watch in the NBA right now.
But in fairness, let's remember that they do trade a top 7 or 8 player in the league. So for them to really, they were kind of maybe a borderline playoff team, which may be a success for being the #1 pick. The one thing you see with rookies is very rarely, I mean, it does happen occasionally, and Tim Duncan was one of them, where rookies actually impact a team's winning and losing. Even LeBron, his teams did not make the playoffs the first 2 years. So really, they need Zion to do really well. They need to hit on some of these draft picks. The Pelicans have not arrived by any stretch of the imagination. They've done a really good job. David Griffin was given, a difficult situation when he walked in. They've done a good job recovering from it. But let's not just declare that everything's going to be.
I understand what you're saying, but let's bear in mind what they actually traded away. They didn't trade away Anthony Davis for the rest of his life. They traded away Anthony Davis for 1 year. They traded away an Anthony Davis who clearly didn't want to be there. So for teams that we've seen in the recent past, and I'm thinking of Dwight Howard in Orlando and some of the others, that was the first one that jumped to my mind, where he just made it clear, I'm getting out of here. You guys trade me if you want to, but I'm leaving. Those teams almost always get stuck kind of holding the bag. It becomes a disaster. In this case, it does not feel that way at all, right?
Yeah, that's why they did a really good job under the circumstances. Just look at the wake of LeBron's teams. Miami's made 1 playoff appearance since he left. The Cavs were a disaster for 4 years. The Cavs were a disaster last year. Just the LeBron comparison. The Magic didn't make the playoffs when Dwight Howard left till this last year, 6 years. So as you said, it's tough.
And here's my thing, will they make the playoffs? I mean, potentially, but still, think about how much more we talked about the Hawks last year than we did the year before. We talk about Trae Young and some of the plays he made. We're going to be talking about the Pelicans. They're relevant now.
Jalen, I said it to you the other day. You said they're not going to be on the radar. I said Zion is the radar. The New Orleans Pelicans have become one of the most interesting teams in the NBA overnight.
I'm glad. Of course, you know, for television purposes and working in the media for ratings, it's great if he's in New York, if he's in LA. I'm telling you, he gets to ease into his career playing with the Pelicans. It's the light won't be as bright. It won't be as much pressure to live up to. Imagine if he got drafted to New York. It's one thing to try to lift the fortunes of a franchise. It's another thing to try to lift the fortunes of the people. Okay? He doesn't have to do that in this situation. They're helping him out, like Jay and Wendy are talking about, and I think that's going to allow him to flourish.
No, look, I mean, here's the one thing I would say is that, yes, the notion of getting big markets into the finals and all that kind of stuff is one way of looking at it. Another way, and I've been saying this for years, and this is just the fan in me talking, is that what's the old expression, like a fence is only as strong as its weakest links? I mean, you don't want New Orleans to be an afterthought. You don't want Memphis to be an afterthought. The notion that these small markets now, New Orleans and Memphis, and this was really the story we had the morning after the lottery, to me this is a huge win for the NBA.
Yep.
If Memphis matters, if New Orleans matters, that's a good thing, not a bad thing.
I don't think either of them are going to matter that much.
Yeah, I
You don't think so?
I don't know about. I think
There's
New
a
Orleans
reason
more
to
than
watch
Memphis.
them. Well, Memphis may not become a great team, but you know what? Memphis might get pretty good pretty
I'll
quick.
tell
They
you
got
what,
some good players
I
there.
will
The
say
last
this.
two drafts,
If
Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson, they've got some stuff to build on.
If I'm a basketball fan, I want to see Zion and Ja Morant play. In Summer League, we're going to have them on television here in another week or 10 days. I'm excited to see them play. I don't know if their teams are going to do much in the short term.
I think that the New Orleans, I'm putting it on, what is it? Putting on
Putting
wax?
on wax, yep.
I'm putting it on wax. The Pelicans are going to make the playoffs this year.
Whoa.
Pelicans are going to make the playoffs in a diminished Western Conference this year.
Don't forget about Sacramento Kings.
Let's bet a designer suit on that.
Okay. Which designer?
Negotiations continue.
Right, we need
But
to
let's
know.
bet. We're gonna bet a suit.
We're going to make a bet of some kind. We'll
No,
bet
let's make that bet.
Okay, we'll make that bet.
Okay, yes.
We'll discuss the stakes of this
You just
as we
cleaning
go
up. You cleaning up.
Yeah.
Stephen
don't-
A. Smith, tell him. I see what you're doing.
Come on, Stephen A. owes you shoes. I'm going to owe you a suit.
It's the whole ensemble. That's the
Best
point.
dressed man in New York. All right, we got to find out all the things that Woj knows. Let's do that right now.
Yeah, Woj and I decided we're actually betting the designer of my suit, which happens to be Steven Tyler today. But Adrian Wojnarowski with me here. Your overall thoughts on the Pelicans and what David Griffin has done in this last week. He went there because he wanted a lot of control. He's made a lot happen.
He has. Listen, they were very fortunate to win the lottery to get Zion because it opened up a lot of doors for them and gave them, I think, the confidence to go out and not do a teardown post Anthony Davis. And that's typically what happens in a small market. I mean, you know, Greeny mentioned Dwight Howard after he left, and you know that's what typically happens. But what he's done is use Zion as the cornerstone to go forward with, because they still have Drew Holiday, who is a borderline all-star level guard. But the draft picks he got in this deal, not just the ones that they used last night that they flipped to Atlanta in that deal, but going forward, they have not only cap space now this summer, $30 million to go out and spend on, you know, if they want to go after an Al Horford, they could do that and let Jackson Hayes apprentice under him. They could split that money up. They don't have to spend it all, but they have a chance to bring in some veterans here to get back in the playoffs. And I think for this organization, when a big player becomes available here in the next few years, they've got the draft assets to go out and do a big trade, to bring in an impact player, because those picks going forward, when high school players are coming back into the draft, potentially in 2022, that's going to be a really valuable draft. And to have assets, multiple assets in those years, that could bring you back a lot. So they're set up here, I think, in the short term to do something in free agency, perhaps maybe even compete to get back in the playoffs. But they're set up now long-term around Zion Williamson, Drew Holiday, to have a team that's going to be able to compete in a West that's going to probably look very different with Golden State coming back to the pack next season.
Yeah, the foresight there is impressive. Another big takeaway from you for the draft last night as it relates to Nasir Little.
Well, look at Portland and what they've been able to do in the last two drafts. Last year, Anthony Simons, who was essentially a high school player, did a year of post-grad. Now, he was too young to crack the rotation on a team in the West that got to the Western Conference Finals. But now having Simons and having Nasir Little, who is a lottery-level talent, who's going to have to come in and prove himself they have done a tremendous job, Neil O'Shea, Terry Stotts in Portland, of developing young players. Portland is trying to find that third star, that third impact player to go with Dame Lillard, CJ McCollum. Now you have two young players that either you can continue to develop, but if a top level, if an all-star player becomes available for a trade, now they start to have the assets to go out and to get that third star with Lillard, with McCollum. All of a sudden, Portland is not just a team that could get to the Western Conference Finals. They're a team competing to get to the NBA Finals in the West.
Saw Nasir Little with Maria Taylor last night after he was drafted. You could see the chip on his shoulder. It was almost tangible, so I think he's motivated as well. Let's get to Kawhi, just days away from free agency. And Kawhi Leonard is in the support, certainly, of Toronto fans. He attended last night's Blue Jays game. Fans giving him a standing ovation. His name appeared on the scoreboard. But will the NBA Finals MVP stay in Toronto or sign elsewhere? And Woj, you've been talking about this with Kawhi and meetings that he may take. You talked about it again last night on the broadcast. A surprising team that could meet with Kawhi, or at least surprising maybe to some people that thought this is really just the Clippers and the Raptors.
Listen, this still is really just the Clippers and the Raptors. But I'm told they're open to potential meetings with the 76ers, with the Knicks, even the Brooklyn Nets. Now, Philadelphia, their focus is re-signing their own free agents. Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris, J.J. Redick. But there are always relationships that exist that are going to allow teams to get meetings. Very often they're just as courtesies. They're for a favor perhaps in the future. But I think it's conceivable. He's going to sit down with Philly, the Knicks. But this is still a two-team race right now, the Clippers and the Raptors.
Okay, so great clarification there from Woj. And Greeny, it's interesting because Jalen said earlier in the show he doesn't even really like that a star like Kawhi would meet with 3 to 4 teams. And what do we think about the 7?
Well, so I want to ask a question, Woj, if he can hear me over there, and I'm sorry for our director, but I'm going to ask Woj a question from over here, and that is, if it is a two-team race, I think I'm asking this question on behalf of a lot of fans out there. If it is a two-team race between Toronto and the Clippers, what is the purpose of taking meetings with the Sixers, the Knicks, and anybody else?
Because it doesn't take much effort. You know, if you're holding meetings, let's say hypothetically in Los Angeles at a hotel, and an organization comes in for an hour and a half and makes a presentation, it just doesn't take much time on either side to do it. And I think, you know, for Kawhi Leonard and for his representatives, you know, it's something else to listen to. It's an option. But it's not like you're getting on a plane, you're going to spend a day or two in a city in free agency. It doesn't have to extend to that. You know, Bobby Marks could tell you with the Nets, you know, they often got, you know, meetings with big free agents because they were in the New York market, but that didn't necessarily mean, you know, they were in there with LeBron James, with Dwayne Wade, but they would get a meeting with them because it's easy to set up, it's easy to do, and very oftentimes it provides some goodwill for some potential deals in the future with other clients an agent might have.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, thank you very much for that. So let me bring it out here. And then the one piece of that I think then becomes interesting and important is timing. And Wendy, you were talking about this before we started here, is that if you're, you know, I'll let you say it, but if you're a team like the Sixers, you have your priorities, and Woj just ran through what they are. How does this affect the timing of everything?
The Sixers one is really fascinating because if they wanted to, the Sixers could let Tobias Harris, Jimmy Butler, J.J. Redick walk and sign Kawhi Leonard if it was a serious discussion. At the same time, Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris are going to have offers on June 30th. To be honest with you, they already have the offers. And you don't want to like send the wrong message that, hey, we're looking at somebody else. And because this whole thing is about timing. One of the reasons why the Clippers traded Tobias Harris was because that they knew on July 1st they were going to be going after Kevin Durant and Kawhi Leonard, and they knew there was a chance that Tobias Harris could get a max offer elsewhere and not wait. It was one of the reasons why they moved on from him. So timing, especially in a truncated system where we are in 2019, where everything is going to get done within 12 to 24, 48 hours, that stuff matters.
Conspiracy theory. You ready for it?
Yes.
If you really want to sabotage the East, if you're thinking like a genius in that fact, all right, yeah, if time is a big thing, let me take a meeting. Let me take my time.
July 3rd.
Let me take my time, Eastern Conference, Philadelphia 76ers. Let me put Tobias Harris and Jimmy Butler in a weird situation with you guys. Let me sign back with Toronto after I sabotage the situation.
I love this. I love the way
you're thinking about it.
Buy him a suit. Go ahead.
Now you see why I don't like it.
Yeah. Why? Oh, but you don't like it because it throws that off.
Now you see
can
why.
dismantle a franchise.
Now think about, Woj said that they're basically doing it as a formality. It's basically when your representation wants to do a favor for the team and or vice versa. Now, when Paul George does not take a meeting with the Lakers, we now take that as an indictment to their recruiting.
It's insulting, right? Yeah.
Correct. And so now for the player, you go out and take these meetings. You offend the people that you already have on your team. You make the fans think that it's a realistic chance for this guy to come when he's not planning on coming at all. So it's really touch and go, especially when it's the top players in the game.
All right, but the most important thing that we get out of that, again, all these are interesting conversations to have, but the most important thing is, regardless of what reports come out there, he's meeting with them, it's really Toronto and the Clippers, and that's basically it for Kawhi.
That's what we think. That's what we think. I mean, he could still throw us a curveball. This is, Greeny, for 17 years, I've covered the NBA, this is maybe the most murky free agent situation I've seen with all these star players.
But all of them, you mean, not just Kawhi?
Yeah, because we don't know what's going to happen with Durant. You know, we think we now know what's going to happen with Kyrie, but those Durant and Kawhi really control the market, and they are guys who it's just a little bit murky.
This is the first time, Wendy, that you had the top players and you couldn't gauge what they were going to do based on winning, because if that was the case, KD would stay there.
Yep.
And about money, because they're not into it to sign long-term deals. And lastly, all of the top guys have already won championships.
And they both got 2 Finals MVPs, two rings and 2 Finals MVPs.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I know he's
Durant
already done it before, but I'm just, if watching Klay Thompson and KD get hurt the way they did, if your representation does not talk to you about that and say, hey, look, I know you may want to do a one-on-one for Toronto, but what if you come down the wrong way, and how does that set you up? And I know what you're going to say about KD, they're still going to give that money, but still, the longevity of your career can change things depending upon what the injury is.
I'm on your side. Is that what you were going to say?
Kevin Durant is going to get a 5-year offer from his home team and 4-year offers everywhere else. I mean, if you get injured, you get injured.
Yeah.
If you're worried about loss of value, I don't think that loss of value exists. I think if you're at the cream of the crop, you don't have to worry about it.
All right, so you just said we don't know what's going to happen because for all of the reasons, these guys have their rings, the money is, for all intents and purposes, monopoly money to the top level guys anyway, et cetera. So what do they make their decisions based on? If you were in that circumstance right now, what are you weighing?
Power and happiness. That's what I'm seeing happen. If you're somebody like Kawhi Leonard, you have the power in Toronto. You just won a championship. If you go back there, people are going to pick y'all to win the East. You go to the Clippers, you're born in California, people are going to predict y'all to be one of the best teams in the West. That's power. KD, you could sign 5 years in Golden State. They've shown that they couldn't win the championship without you. So now do you stay and rehab there and get the final year? Or do you go somewhere else and chase the large market like a New York City? What about Kyrie? Yes, he's an all-NBA player, but do you want him to come alone if you're the Knicks? If you're the Knicks, after what happened with Boston? And Klay, I don't think he's leaving. And 40% of the league is free agents. So there is going to be a lot of player movement.
Let me give one caveat to expound upon power. Let's not forget about what LeBron James is doing out in L.A. Let's not forget about last night in the draft. The Lakers then took Taylor Horton Tucker, a Clutch Sports client, in the relationship with Rich Paul and how that whole thing's working out. So I think autonomy, too, having the opportunities to make those type of decisions, I'm not saying that's coming from LeBron himself.
I know, but it's crazy. Rich Paul's got a lot of free agents.
Corey Joseph could end up there, too.
They actually have free agents that the Lakers need those positions. They have the Morris brothers. They have Corey Joseph. I don't think it's going to happen, but the Lakers could have an all-clutch starting 5 and not really doing anything to help Rich Paul. But it could happen.
That's power. That's power.
So the point is that there are a lot of other factors that are at work here. And then the first domino that falls, what do we think it's going to be? Is the first domino going to be KD? Is the first domino going to be Kawhi? Are guys like Jimmy Butler? Jimmy Butler does not deserve to be considered a second-tier player in any regard. But in this context, I guess he is. Which is the first domino that falls?
Well, I would refer to it as A-plus free agents and A free agents. So the A-plus
nice way of putting it.
The A-plus free agents will take their time, whatever they want. The A free agents may have to wait a little bit, but there's the B and C free agents who may be able to make moves right away. We see guys now signing for the minimum on July 1st, which is an insane situation, but that's where we are in the league.
We'll be here all of that week with specials in the afternoon. We'll be all over NBA free agency. We'll take a quick break coming up here on